Hi, HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today we have a special guest. We're joined by Gustavo Canton. Gustavo is the Vice President of People Analytics at Schneider Electric. Gustavo, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks
I'm
for
good,
having me.
thank you very much. Pardon?
Happy to be here.
Fantastic, Gustavo. Gustavo, for our listeners that aren't aware of yourself, and give us a bit of a background about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
I'm actually from Panama in Central America, so my first language is Spanish, and I'm an engineer by trade. And I had a very, what I would say, traditional background in schooling back in Panama. Then I came to the US about 2003, and I started doing my studies and getting to my master's. And at the time, remember, 2005, this topic of analytics was not even on the radar. People didn't talk about it at all.
No, it didn't exist.
However, we used to talk about statistics, optimization theory, simulation, all these different fields, right? And I was very much into these kind of topics. So when I did my master's, I had the opportunity to get recruited for an internship in a small company called Sam's Club, which is one of the biggest warehouse retailers in the US. And that's actually a very important, I would say, point in my career, because it allowed me to work on a place that had very good data, clean data, and lots of it. So when people were talking about big data, that's big data, right? And for those who don't know, Sam's Club is part of another company called Walmart Inc. For those who don't know, it's actually one of the biggest, well, it's the biggest company in the world. It has 2.2 million employees across the globe. So that actually has another important point in my career, because I started my first 8 years in the marketing space, doing marketing strategy and dealing with customer data, right? And as I went through my journey, it's funny because I remember actually sitting down with the Facebook team and the Google team, trying to figure out how do we actually take their data and make value out of it for retail. So, there was a lot of discovery and a lot of testing and trial for me in my career at that point in time. But then at one point, somebody approached me and said, "Hey, Gustavo, now that you have all this knowledge in marketing, could you help us on the HR space?" And around 2007, I did a special project for HR. And I guess that was a big hit, because since then, they keep recruiting me and trying to bring me into the HR side. However, I was in love with analytics. I was not really in love with people analytics. Until one day in around 2011, 2012, I actually got recruited and convinced to go to the HR side. And the reason I went to HR is because for me personally, I wanted to have a different experience. I wanted to learn a space that was new to me. And once I got into it, it actually became one of the best decisions of my life, because the HR space allowed me to really do something that was very much in line with my purpose. What I felt was actually something fulfilling with me in the analytics space, but also in my personal space, doing something that I could see the impact on people's life on a day-to-day. And since then, I actually been in several roles in the people analytics, through research, social media, test and learn, obviously food analytics, strategy, and so on. I did that until 2017 in June in Walmart. And then from there, I switched to my current role as VP of People Analytics in Schneider Electric. So I've been here for about a year and 3 months. And what I can tell you is that in this space now, I'm actually living in Paris, France, which is a change, right? It's a different perspective, but also it's a different industry, which is part of the reason I wanted to come and take on this role. Because again, I am trying to learn people analytics from a different landscape and with a very global team to actually help enrich my career. So that's a little summary of kind of my journey, and I'm sure there is a lot more that we can discuss throughout that.
Fantastic. I always love asking that question, because everyone's journey into people analytics is always different. And no one planned to be there, right? Because as you said, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, the word people analytics, HR analytics didn't exist.
Yeah.
And what I love about your story as well is that you also have that marketing background combined with that as well, because I think something missing in the people analytics space is the ability to actually sell it internally and promote it internally to the business. So I'm sure you picked up some very valuable skills in the marketing, which has helped you. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's very fair. And it's interesting because I think, and you can read a lot about this, sometimes in this digital era, it's so much easier to come into HR and have that value mindset when you come from the outside than when you are within HR, right? Because in HR, sometimes you keep hearing that we in HR needs to be task-driven or administrative-driven, but in reality, HR is the engine that brings all the talent in the organization, which is the innovation of the organization that is enabled by technology, right? So I think we in HR sometimes don't understand the value that we can provide, and by having a background in marketing or areas outside HR, it's easier for you to really see how can you make a difference and connect the dots with value, which ultimately you have to do, right?
So on that point, Gustavo, when you think about people analytics, what does people analytics mean to you, and why is it so important for businesses?
Let's look at this in two ways. Let's talk about this financially speaking, and let's talk about this in terms of the impact to the organization, okay? So financially speaking, if you look at the P&L, one of the biggest areas of cost for an organization is your labor force. In the past, most organizations were not forced to actually maximize sometimes the value of HR because disruption was not as a reality as it is today. In the past, organizations were forced to make changes every decade, perhaps. Now, organizations disappear every week, like every 2 weeks, you know.
Daily.
Yeah. It is something unbelievable what is happening. So the rate of change is amazing. And if you don't have a function within HR that helps you not only drive changes for HR, but also throughout the whole business, then you basically are in a disadvantage, comparatively speaking. So you will not stay relevant as an organization. That's one aspect, right? But I think the second aspect is going back to this digital era and disruption. Now we realize how much this talent can actually not only do more productivity, but also influence how the organization shapes the strategy, right? People is not something that is just in HR function. People analytics should be able to be at the center of the enterprise strategy, because that's going to permeate across the business, and it's going to have an impact in sales, finance, marketing, and other areas across the board. So that's the way I see the impact of people analytics.
Fantastic. And a big question I always get from the leaders, especially the practitioners that I work with, the sort of generalist HR practitioners in the businesses, is where do we start? You know, I think a lot of companies are now, it's so overwhelming because there's so many things you can be doing in this space. So, well, where should HR leaders start or businesses start with people analytics? You know, what should the focus be on in the beginning?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I would say at a high level, the first things that you need to do is actually show the value as opposed to fixing the basics in total. What I mean by that is that most organizations, when they sit down and you have a leadership meeting and they say, okay, now we have a function for HR analytics, let's start working with reporting and let's start getting good reports. That's what most leaders tend to do. I think that's a fair approach. However, it takes a long time to actually do the data cleansing and get all the privacy, the governance, to actually get sometimes the reporting the way you would like to do. Most companies are not born digitally, right? So there is a lot of effort and time that it takes for you to get your fixing the basics right? What you should do is, in the beginning, in parallel, you should start basically, first of all, recruiting the right talent for the function, right? And that talent would allow you to start working on problems that really matter to the HR community. So for example, every company, it doesn't matter which company it is that I talk to, are trying to anticipate regrettable turnover. They are trying to mitigate it, correct? And so for an HRBP today in any organization, they would love to have a model that allows them to actually predict the turnover of their high potentials in their areas. So that will be, to me, a very good place to start. And also because you are able to tangibly see the difference between what you are doing today versus what the model is telling you, it will be easy to show the value. And so that way the general practitioner will get it and say, oh, great, I understand how analytics helps me tangibly. But also the leaders will say, okay, I can see that this has a value, I will invest more, you see? So that's what I start first. That's in terms of the work. In terms of the mindset, which is very important, I think there are two very practical pieces of advice that I would like to give. Number one, the first thing we have to do is ask ourselves, what are we solving for? I don't think in HR, we ask that question enough. And we just go with the trend and we execute very well, but we don't take a hold to our leaders and say, what are you really trying to solve with this? If you are really able to articulate that, it would allow us to first understand well what is the real question and the real problem. And the second question is, now once you understand what is the purpose of what you're trying to solve for, don't just wait for the end of the project to see if you did something good or not. What you should do is from the beginning, you should make some assumptions and try to estimate, comparing to other use cases, what real value are you getting from it? Because there are so much stuff to do, right? This is a space that there is, you
Yes.
can do 1,000 things.
Yeah.
But if you start estimating what is the value of the project in advance, it will allow you to see in your portfolio where you need to spend your time for low effort, high value activities. So that will be my pragmatic piece of advice from HR, the HR community.
Fantastic. So first and foremost, make sure you try and get that quick win to justify value for yourself and obviously for the rest of the leadership team. Because otherwise, if you spend so much time, as you mentioned, building the process, getting the data ready, etc., it could be maybe 6-12 months before you've shown any real return. And I'm sure that's probably, am I being realistic on that, or maybe longer?
Yeah, I would say 6 months is the minimum.
The minimum.
In my experience, on average.
Okay,
right?
minimum. Okay, fantastic. And then secondly, you're saying don't go focus on everything. Just focus on what's going to have the biggest impact on the business, and focus your time and effort there. Would that be
right?
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
You mentioned data in that, and I've obviously heard biggest problem for many organizations is getting the clean data. Otherwise, nothing else works, right? Could you share any advice on guidance there, and on how to help the leaders when they're approaching this and how they're gathering this data in the organizations based on your experience?
Sure. So first of all, you have to have two things. You need to have very strong sponsorship from your CHRO, and you need to have a very good partnership with your IT function, right? And it depends where your people analytics team lies. Some people analytics teams are based on their HR. Some of them are based on their operations. Some of them are based on their strategy, IT. It all depends, right? But you need to have very good alignment with IT. And I see the data component in two big streams. There is one work stream about what is the systems and technology infrastructure you have in place to actually collect data and transfer data to different systems. That's one big component. And the second component is you within HR have a lot of people candidates who are coming in, or HRBPs who actually input data into the system, right? So there is a part that is systematically that you need to fix first, very importantly. And there is a component that in parallel you can start working, which is how do you fix the data within HR? I'm telling you this way because most organizations that I talk to, and we sometimes make that mistake, we try to spend too much time on the manual aspect of HR, meaning how do we get HRBPs to input data correctly? How do we have the candidates have the right data into the recruiting system, which is good, but we don't spend enough time on the systematic technology aspect. And what happens is then you ended up trying to fight this battle with data for 5 years, even 10 years, and it never gets fixed. It's like
you're not really solving the root cause.
Exactly.
You're basically putting a Band-Aid, a temporary Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that happens very often. And unfortunately, sometimes it's hard to show. And the way to show it is you are not, if you start trying to take an executive or a leader and you try to show them all the architecture, people are going to get lost. What you need to do is you create a product, an analytic solution, and you show them, okay, this is the product. And from this product, what are your issues with the data? And then in the outcome, you will see, okay, I have an issue with this attribute or X field or X calculation, and you can reverse engineer what the root cause is and fix it that way. I think that that's a more practical approach in my opinion.
Instead of allocating more people, more resources to make that work in the current state. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, on that point, in terms of the people then, what skills do companies required to effectively do people analytics in their business?
Well, first of all, number one, I think you cannot compromise on this. Meaning, if you're gonna bring somebody to do analytics, it cannot be somebody who can do basic reporting, right? Reporting is important, but that's not analytics. To me, analytics in the end is about the people, and you need to tell a story. Because when it comes about people, there is always some variability, right? So that's important. And then you have to think about, if the output of it is the story, I need the talent necessary to put together the story. In my case, I like to divide it in 5 capabilities. I need people who are really good with data management, that has many dimensions. I need people who are really good visualizing the data and doing the storytelling, right? I need people who understand the advanced analytics component. I need people who understand the business, and I need people who understand research to look at what is happening beyond what you get from the data, plus what is happening outside of the organization. And from there, you can say, you know, there are many skill sets. Right now, if you actually rank some of the skill sets that are more hard to find and retain, I would say people who are very good digitally, that understands what we call the end-to-end process, from actually getting data, cleaning data, and creating digital applications. That's a very hard skill to recruit and retain, you know, for the most part. But it's actually very necessary for you to have in your team. Obviously, there is always been the statistician or data scientist to create the models and so on. I think that that profile is very well known, but there are other profiles that might not be as common in many companies. For example, I used to hire in my previous role, in my previous organization, I used to hire a data artist. And this person's role was help us to tell the story. You know?
I was going to ask you that, because that seems to be one of the biggest challenges I hear, is how do you tell it in a story? Because most of the technical analytics leaders don't have those soft skills and able to just tell it in a story in a way that the business can understand.
Yeah, so first of all, you need somebody who is really good at simplifying ideas and who understands very well how to connect something very complex into something very simple, right? But also usually this person have some knowledge in Adobe or web applications. They understand actually how to use visuals to tell a story, similar to what you will do in a marketing ad, very similar. And another thing that is important to understand, in an organization like mine, for example, there is 150,000 employees, and all of them might learn in different ways. So in some cases, if I share a dashboard, that might work with some people, but other people might connect better with a white paper. Other people might connect better with just a simple PowerPoint, you know, or some of them would like to have videos and animation. So we need a person that actually understands the different channels and can help us create the script and put the animation, the visualization for each one of those channels. So that's usually the type of profile that I look for this kind of role.
Fantastic. And I love that last one. I think that's one that I think is missing in many of the organizations that I speak to. They don't have someone who does that. And it's we take the similar approach with our content too. We try to create video, we do white paper, we do audio. So because we appreciate that people learn in different ways and they engage with content in different ways as well. So I love the fact that you've gone to that effort to do that for your organization. That's amazing. Where we are now, Gustavo, what are you currently most obsessed with? You know, what is the area of HR or people analytics that you're really excited about right now and that you're spending a lot of time looking into?
Right now, I am, if you ask me what am I the most obsessed about, I'm actually the most obsessed about in terms of automation and efficiency. And I know this doesn't sound like the typical analytics response, right? But if you ask me what products I deliver as a leader for the organization, it's three of them: insights, visualizations, and efficiency. And in this organization, like many organizations, there is so much room to automate and create efficiencies that that's what I'm trying to put a lot of the effort. And the reason being is because if I can take a lot of these manual process and a lot of these disparate processes and put it into a more simplified methodology or way or process, I can free up a lot of the time from the team. I can free up a lot of the time from actually my clients within the company. And also that would allow them to spend more time doing advanced analytics, doing more research, doing more visualization, doing the things that are really forward-looking as opposed to backward-looking, right? I am in an organization that started the journey in January. So we've only been 10 months in our journey, so to speak, right? So there is a lot of ways for us to go. And for me, this is the area that I am obsessed every day to see how can we free up people's time. We actually have a tagline here in Schneider Electric called "Free Up Your Energy," and that to me is my number one priority.
Fantastic. And as you said, so they can focus on more strategic tasks, value add tasks as well. And I suppose that's going to be an ongoing journey for you, right? That's never really going to end because there's always going to be more things that you can improve in terms of the process, right? So that's very interesting. So in your mind, what does the future hold for people analytics? We keep hearing, predictive analytics, prescriptive analytics, AI, machine learning, etc. Where do you see what the future? What does the future of people analytics look like in an organization?
It's very hard to really predict what's going to happen. To be very transparent, when I started my journey in HR 5 years ago, it's very hard to actually predict what is happening today, right? But what I will tell you is now, because of machine learning and AI and all of these things, we can do things that are, unbelievable. Like, for example, taking an advanced model for predictive model of turnover and actually use machine learning to deploy it in an entire country and just leave it running, right? Perpetually, and keep learning over time. Like, that's something that we're working on today, right? I believe in 5 years, what I will think is, number one, I will not think about our team in terms of people. I think people are going to be a very important component for creation and innovation. But in terms of execution, I will rely much more on algorithms and robots, right? That's a reality. And people might think this sounds futuristic, and there are many companies that are already doing this. And in fact, they have robots to do tasks, and they have algorithms to actually do the work of an individual. And in fact, one of the use cases that I'm working on is how do we take data from candidates, external data, and actually automate the process for the recruiting team so they don't have to be looking for all this data in one place. And then from there, now that we have to take the data, use a robot to actually do all the tasks from the recruiter. So he doesn't have to be searching things over and over. So the world is going to be, the way I see it, instead of the HR people trying to look for the information, is going to be more about the HR people having the readiness to consume a lot of information and coming to them. That to me is a very distinct difference between the world of today and the world of tomorrow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And we're already seeing it, right? We're already seeing it. You only have to look at your mobile phone to see the amount of information that's at the touch of a button that you now have, that you don't even have to go out there and look. It's coming to you. It's just, I am overwhelmed every day. There's so much to consume. There's so much I don't have enough time in my day to even get through all of the things that I want to consume. So I completely understand that. So it's going to be a switch in mentality, isn't it? In terms of you're going to have it all at your touch of your button. Now it's going to be how best to consume it, what adds the most value to the organization. So it's going to be a completely different problem that we're going to have on that. Fantastic. Well, look, Gustavo, that leads us quite nicely onto our quick fire round, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no more than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Ready.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior leader in the people analytics space?
I think you need to learn to influence, and to learn to influence, you need to understand how to put together a business value and how to make sure, again, your leadership connect with your idea. And to do that, it does take time, and it does take a broader perspective of putting all the dots together.
What's the best piece of business advice?
The best piece of business advice was go to the place that is disrupting the most or changing the most, because that's where you're going to learn the fastest. And I agree. Most of us sometimes are scared to go to towards the disruption, but if you actually are within that place, you will learn the most. And for me, that's one of the most important goals for my career, right? Is to learn.
I love that, by the way. That's fantastic. What's the best book you would recommend to our audience, and why?
There is a book. It is actually called The Innovation Mentality by an author called Glenn Jopis from the Glenn Jopis Group. And what he does, he actually focused on the culture and the transformational part of the digital disruption, which is very important to understand, so you can do the right analytics and you can position yourself properly. And sometimes we spend too much time in analytics thinking about technology or thinking about just the methodologies, as opposed to the purpose of it and the culture of it and what is important in the mindset to change. So that's a book that I recommend highly.
Fantastic. And could you share some internet resources that you use yourself to keep up to date with current events, technology? What are your go-to online resources?
Well, I'm sure I use most of the resources that most people do, but I like to read a lot some of the material from Deloitte by Bernstein in certain aspects about innovation and so on. They have a lot of papers in that. Harvard Business Review, to understand what is happening with the business and so on, what are things that are happening. In terms of technology, I spend a lot of time talking to vendors and experts in technology from different realms to understand what is happening. And also I try to attend to a lot of conferences or podcasts, or other leadership gatherings, so I can understand what is happening. It's hard sometimes to find relevant information that it really applies to you. Sometimes what you find in the markets are very broad, so it's good sometimes to talk to somebody who is going through your same pain points and your same challenges, right?
Fantastic. On that point, I'm going to throw in a bonus question because it's important. What's the main question that our HR leaders should be asking when they're being approached by solution providers in this space? What's the most important question they need to ask?
I'm going to flip it to you. I think what I would say to them is they should ask, how can we mature organization through people analytics so we can actually evolve? Because most companies don't evolve, it's just they revolve, which is like a revolving door, right? And so for them to actually evolve, they need to ask the right questions. That's what leaders need to learn the most. If they actually know how to ask the right questions, your organization will mature much faster, including your people analytics function, because we spend a lot of time trying to sometimes answer questions that don't really get to the root of the issue, right?
Fantastic. I'm glad I asked that question now. What's one thing about your business that most excites you today?
I think there is a lot of stuff to be excited about. I think in our case, we are actually a very diverse organization, right? And with all this diversity, we are making we're putting a lot of effort to try to understand how do we create a very inclusive environment. And so there is a lot of analysis and data that can be used today, like for example, network analysis to understand how people connect with each other, how groups collaborate, networks of collaboration, and that has implications for inclusion and diversity. That's an area that is really exciting for me to explore, and that 5 years ago you couldn't do with the existing tools. So I think that will be an area that I'm very excited to learn more and to use more, because I think for our organization, being so diverse, inclusiveness is a key success factor for us to thrive.
Fantastic. Well, look, Gustavo, I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us. You've definitely given us a lot of valuable insights and advice that I know our listeners will be a lot better off for it. So I really appreciate that. Before we part ways, Gustavo, if there's one message or one piece of advice you could give to HR leaders, what would that be? And secondly, what's the best way for them to reach out to you if they have any questions or would like to get in contact with you?
Okay, that sounds good. I think my main advice to leaders will be when you actually have an HR analytics function and you make this investment, please make sure you truly understand how you can help your analytics practitioners in the organization and your HR community to take action on the insights. Because sometimes we expect analytics to solve everything, right? But analytics is like a prescription. Somebody has to go to the pharmacy, get the medicine, and actually follow the treatment plan. Leaders need to be aware that there is an effort required from them to actually get us to unlock the value of analytics. That's important. And for anybody who would like to contact me, I'm sure you can provide my detailed information, but I think the best way is via LinkedIn, Gustavo Canton, or you can actually email me at gustavo.canton@schneider-electric.com. And I'm happy always to change ideas and learn from others. So very open to and happy to share my knowledge.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again, Gustavo. For everyone listening, guys, if you head over to hrleaders.com, you'll find all of the show notes from the episode. Everything we've been talking about, any of the resources that have been mentioned will all be linked in there. So check that out. Gustavo, thank you again for sharing your journey and your experience with our listeners. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Okay. See you soon. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you all. Take care.